We are running horribly late, as you can see, so the program has been slightly amended. We are going to take the session on the African Declaration on Internet Rights and Freedoms now. The presentation will be for 15 minutes, and I will allow 15 minutes for question time and 5 minutes for wrap-up. After which, we will adjourn for lunch. Lunch will be in the canteen up the pathway. You will be given a voucher for your lunch. Before you go to lunch, stop off on the right on the lawn and we will take the photo. So those are some of the housekeeping arrangements I am informing you of. A register is supposed to be going around for signing. I know some members have raised their concern that their presence has not been acknowledged. I've been assured that the register will go around. So, without further ado, I'm going to call on Sekiwe Lani, Sekatlani, I still got it wrong, darling, despite the phonetics, Pamodi. He is the Africa Policy Coordinator for the Association for Progressive Communications, and he's going to talk to us on a template for internet governance in Africa. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairperson. And thank you to you, honourable members, the Centre for Human Rights, for inviting us to make this input and present what is really a dream for us as the Association for Progressive Communications for establishing collective African-generated guidelines around how it is that we can leverage the power of technology, and particularly the internet, to promote openness, access, social and economic development for our people and on our terms, which is quite a critical thing for us in the global south, and particularly in Africa, who are often following what is happening in the north on the north's terms, and finding ourselves in these double binds around, in the internet space at least, issues such as our data sovereignty, what the core issues that we need to be harnessing the power of technology and the internet should actually be, and how we put them on the agenda for ourselves as opposed to being compelled by the North and the established protocols and practices that are received from the North in terms of what we want to do and what we need to do for our people. So we thank you for this opportunity. Let me begin by giving a sense of who we are as an organization, as the Association for Progressive Communications. The Association for Progressive Communications is an international civil society organization that specifically looks at how it is that we can leverage the power and reach of technology in order to improve the lives of the people in the global south. Although we engage at an international level, our specific regions of focus or areas of focus are in the global south and are directed by our members, for we are a membership-based organization, and partners ranging from civil society organizations right through to state parties and actors in terms of what we can do in the global south around improving the lives of our people using technologies. My role is to do this work, or at least translate this work within the African context, and one of our key projects or programs or initiatives, if you will, is indeed the African Declaration on Internet Rights and Freedoms. So let me begin by giving you a sense of what is the African Declaration on Internet Rights and Freedoms. My apologies, I'm just wanting to adjust to being able to use this unusual device. There we are. Thanks. So what is the African Declaration on Internet Rights and Freedoms? The Declaration is a set of principles and norms for Internet policy and policymaking and governance. It is a framework which was developed in a ground-up process from within the African context, led by African civil society initiatives, together with state parties and actors around developing a framework or guidelines through which we may be able to promote human and people's rights online and really advance our agenda in terms of realizing these rights in a substantive manner using the power of technology, which we can no longer avoid and we must be actively engaging with. This is quite... Some of the organizations that have been involved in... Oh my goodness, I don't even know what's happening here. Okay, cool. So let's just start there, yes. So our mission is to present and encourage local state actors, as well as sub-regional and regional bodies to look to this document as a reference document or guidelines to shape the internet policy making and governance across the continent, as I had said. The initiative is led by a civil society group and supporters from across the region, as I'd indicated. And we have also had input in the crafting of this guidelines or set of guidelines for internet policy making from national human rights institutions, for instance, members of parliament in various jurisdictions, as well as through various regional or other parties to regional mechanisms on the continent. Some of the organizations who have been involved include ourselves, of course, the APC, Article 19, and particularly the East Africa regional program, the Kenyan ICT Action Network, HICTANET, Protège QV, an organization in Cameroon, which does incredible work around advancing internet rights and freedoms in their local context, speaking back to their specific issues, Paradigm Initiative Africa, who have done incredible advocacy work around this policy framework, to the extent that there is a bill on the table which has now gone through its third reading in the legislature that is framed around this positive rights-based framework for internet governance and policy making and legislation in the country, in spite of the fact that the pattern across the board has really been a more cybersecurity and cybercrime centric approach. We have Media Foundation West Africa, as well as Media Rights Agenda, just to name some of them. What the declaration is based on and what informs it are these key documents and instruments that are developed from within the African context. So we have the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, the Windhoek Declaration on promoting an independent and pluralistic African press, the African Charter on Broadcasting, the Declaration of Principles of Freedom of Expression in Africa, as well as the African Platform on Access to Information Declaration of 2011. The process which we followed to develop this framework began in 2013, where we had the African Internet Governance Forum in Nairobi. It emerged that something like this was necessary in order to enable us to actually start taking a collective approach as a region towards establishing these positive rights-based frameworks around how it is that we integrate and utilize the internet as a technology in order to be able to serve our people and improve their lives. It was then at the regional civil society meeting in Johannesburg in February 2014 that these 21 organizations that is addressing our needs. There's freedom of expression, the right to information, which have been well canvassed in the previous session, freedom of assembly and association, because the internet itself is not just this technology, this ephemeral place. It is a place where life happens, both public and private. It is also a tool through which public and private life in real world terms, if we would like to call it that, actually can be mediated. And so people are organizing online, they're assembling online, which is why, as we heard in the previous session, we are seeing this increasing pattern of intentional internet disruptions or interruptions and shutdowns, or as the popular language is frames it as, although we prefer to use the more technical language of intentional internet interruptions. There's the question of cultural and linguistic diversity and how that can impact on the promotion of economic, social, and cultural rights, in addition to civil and political as well as socioeconomic rights. The right to development and access to knowledge. At the moment, the whole world is going through a period or a stage where there's a huge discussion around IP or the ownership of knowledge and knowledge production, of who gets to control the knowledge that is being generated and created and being utilized on and through the internet, in particular as a facilitator of these things. There are these technologies that trap us into paying monies that we don't have in our context in order to access services and platforms which are instrumental in our ability to advance our various rights and improve our lives. There's the question of privacy and data protection, which is a critical issue at the moment as we're looking at, as we engage with the question of where does our data reside? How is it being used? Particularly in the space where we are now, as a continent, starting to move into the space of using the internet to deliver services directly to our people through e-services. And it raises questions for us as to, what are the frameworks or mechanisms that we can use and establish in order to be able to ensure that our citizens and rights bearers whom we serve, or at least whom you serve and represent, have full control and sovereignty over their data so that they may use it as they would like to, and provide it or withhold it as they please, while also being able to have it accessible to state parties to ensure that they can more effectively reach their citizens and their people in order to improve their lives through these direct e-services. There's the question of security, stability, and the resilience of the internet. I don't think I need to go into very much detail around the increasing use of the internet as a vehicle in order to disrupt state security, to disrupt physical security of citizens, and governments are necessarily needing to respond to this for the safety and security of the state and the state for its people, and we are now needing to think about, well, in what ways can we structure our frameworks and our legislation and policies in order to be able to ensure maximum enjoyment of rights for our people, while also ensuring state security and citizen security, particularly with the ways in which the internet is being used by terror groups, hate groups, and so forth. One of the other principles is around marginalized groups and groups at risk. We have seen in the Horn of Africa how, as a result of the sheer state of terror, and we see this also in Nigeria, there's a huge refugee crisis. People are moving across borders to find security elsewhere.
Microphone, please. Microphone. Microphone. Microphone.
Yeah, it's okay now.
And the internet is becoming a space where that is being driven, and we need to find ways in which we can use the internet to counter that and create frameworks in which we can secure the people, our guests that we receive in our countries, for their protection and their security, and while not exposing them to harm within our homes, where we have provided this space. There's questions around the right to due process, and importantly, gender equality and the advancement of the rights and opportunities are available to women and girl children in particular, who in our context tend to be very vulnerabilized, very marginalized in uneven ways across the continent, but certainly it is a dominant theme for us. And then lastly, there's the question of democratic and multi-stakeholder internet governance. We are seeing that there are various, that the various policy and legislation-making processes are being state-driven and tend not to involve people, citizens who use these technologies, who use the internet to improve and advance their lives, in order to inform it to make those policies and legislation much more responsive to their needs, while also ensuring that the state's needs and intent to protect and provide for its citizens are also covered. So we are wanting to promote a democratic and multi-stakeholder approach where citizens, rights bearers, state parties, the technological community, and the Googles of the world, who really also operate with a bottom line framework in spite of the incredible work that they're doing in order to improve the lives of our people on this continent, to come together and work in a collective and democratic process that is open, that is open to innovation and new ideas around how it is that the internet can be leveraged to improve the lives of people in our country through official democratic channels that are established to protect and promote the interests of our people through our governments. So these are the 13 broad principles. I want to make available to you, given the fact that time is not on our side, and I've had this wonderful presentation for you, set out to go into each of these principles in detail, which I cannot, unfortunately. But I'd like to point you to where you might be able to look and access this framework that we have developed, and what it is that you can do as members of the Pan-African Parliament when you return home and speak back to your constituencies around perhaps looking at a process of engaging with this framework, which is very progressive, I think, we believe, and is also very responsive to the various contexts across the continent, but also is inherently informed by the need to ensure that we have a rights-based framework towards developing internet legislation, policy, and the processes of governance. The first thing you can do is, if you look to the top left box, is have a look at the website, africaninternetrights.org, where all of these principles are articulated in great detail, and there is a community built around them, which we invite you to engage in and participate in, and also share with your colleagues and your constituencies, and perhaps consider a process towards engaging with this, towards an endorsement. Secondly, share through the various mechanisms that you interact on. Hashtag it if you are on Twitter or Facebook, which most of us are, or WhatsApp really, and make your voice heard around how this declaration might be able to unlock the potential that we have. And then lastly, if you look at the bottom right-hand box, to engage directly with this, we've created a platform called engage.africa, africaninternetrights.org, again, where it's a community and a space that is alive and active for you to ask questions, to present some ideas, or present what is happening in your context and how these principles that we have outlined and offered to the continent may be applied or may be improved upon, or may even be changed in order to be more responsive to the needs of our people whom we serve. So I thank you, and I thank you that
Merci, Madame la.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just wanted to also commend the presenter for the conviction that he showed when he was speaking. But I'd like to admit that I have some problems. The first problem is to know what we mean by an African declaration. Is it up to an NGO or an individual or a group of people to make a declaration on behalf of Africa, or is it an African declaration that has been accepted by the heads of state and government? As the representatives of the member states, what are we supposed to do with that declaration? Should we make sure that it is adopted by our states? Are we supposed to ratify it? That's the first concern that I wanted to raise. The second concern is that you say that it is internet rights and freedoms. If it's a right needs to be granted by something. Is it a right that comes from a certain authority, but freedom is something else? When you talk about freedom, it means that people need to take such freedom. But when it is a right, it means that it needs to be granted by someone or something. Which authority is granting that right? And we have these declarations, but we need to know where they originate from. Thank you.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Chairperson, for giving me the floor. I just wanted to go back to the idea that I raised. These presentations are very interesting, but the problem is that there is no document being circulated. They do a presentation, and very often we take notes, but we don't have any documents that we can use, and we strongly want to express our regret for that. I wanted to highlight this to the Bureau of the Pan-African Parliament. This is just becoming something that we keep repeating, and we need to avoid it. Documents need to be made available to parliamentarians, because we're not just coming for ourselves, but we're coming for the different parliaments, the national parliaments. We need to send everything that we learn here to our member states, but without a document, it's difficult. I'm very grateful to the presenter for his presentation, and we see that it was very rich, and we can use it in various contexts. But however, I just wanted to know everything that has been presented. Where are we at member state level? What are the practical observations that can be presented to us concerning developments and evolutions in terms of these internet rights and freedoms at member state level? Can you give us a clear assessment of the 53 African Union member states? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I fully agree with you with regard to the documentation. It is something that continues to irk us every time we come here, but I did apologize and say that it's not the fault of the presenter. He has already made it available. It's PAP that has not presented it to you. I can take one more question before we wrap up. Okay, here in the front. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. In the name of God Almighty, my name is Osman Hashim. I am from Sudan. I thank the the honorable presenters, and in specific the last but not least presentation that was presented. I do believe that the use of technology and internet as tools are essential in all aspects of our life today. There is a declaration, and that declaration is very important. However, my intervention is around that. Are these declarations serving the people of Africa? We are well aware of the situation that this continent faces in terms of access to technology, and this is directly related to educational programs and academic progress and the exchange of benefits between states. This is a package that has to be evaluated as a whole in a holistic manner. We cannot look into one pocket and ignore the rest. As the presenter has presented, that Google is a commercial company that has a bottom line at the end of the day and also examines its own revenue and return on investment. The expense is over any of the social, economic, and interests of the people that can be used on the ground to improve the skills of the people on the ground. Therefore, this is a big challenge that we face. We are in front of states that's creating confusion through these companies. Therefore, we require an extensive amount of harmonization so that Africa can benefit from these technologies in the future.
Honorable from Gambia, I'll give you the last bite. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am Alhaji Mbo from Gambia, and I want to thank the speaker for the information actually he has shared about the rights to the internet rights and freedoms. Now, one thing I just want to comment on is about the difference between actually rights and privileges. For our governments to really understand that the internet actually is not owned by any of our governments. The internet is there where we can actually use to be able to improve our lives, to be able to generate a lot of information where we can share with our people. Because once your people are well informed, you're going to see that the development in every part or every aspect of the economy is going to be enhanced. But we must also understand that it is not a privilege that they can give you and take away any minute or any day. And the rights that he's been talking about, and I think these are the key things that the African continent actually needs. We need to have rights to information. We need to be able to share along the lines anything that would help us to move forward. Specifically in the not so well developed economies, this is exactly what we need. Now, the previous speaker even on the Google, about Google, really I think they're doing their part, even though they're a commercial entity, but they've been actually helping a lot of African countries. For example, the Gambia, where they have installed some Google cache servers. Now, once you have these things, it means the search that you actually do across the continent or across the world, it makes it even faster. And they are doing this at no cost to us. Because we are running the organization called the 6P, where we launch these servers that would actually help, especially low-income earners, especially those that could not have access because of the cost. There's cost involved with speed. The higher speed that you get, also the more money that you actually pay. But Google actually has sacrificed a lot of money to buy servers for not only Gambia, but there are a lot of African countries that actually they're doing that, and they're also trained, which I think is good. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Madam.
Shukran.
Thank you, and I would like to state that there are 2 points from my side that I would like to discuss. One, we have we have a great amount of benefit from the presentations that we have listened to this morning, and that is around participation. Participation comes in the form of participating in elections and digital rights to reach and have access of information, because without information you will not be able to participate effectively in any society, and participation is what achieves the objectives of democracy and good governance and human rights, and those are all the aspirations of our peoples of Africa. And we have also witnessed through the presentations that there are an extensive amount of progress. Yes, it is progress at a good rate, slow but a good rate, from the various presentations.
You know, one takes it back to Parliament. What do we say is the status? So I think that's key, one of the key things that you have to respond. You have 5 minutes in which to do that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So let's get right to it. And perhaps this is what I should have led with. From the get-go. The initiative is merely an initiative. We worked together, made an assessment of what was happening in the country, in the region. Speaking to the honourable member from Sudan, this question of harmonization of legal frameworks, policies at a regional, at the sub-regional level right through to a regional level. The status of the document is merely an offering, saying, how about we look at these sets of principles, these 13 principles that apply across the board in terms of the experience of people in Africa who are both online and are also coming online. The people of this continent's access to internet is growing at an incredible rate. We see this in how the Googles of the world, the Facebooks of the world, major telecoms operators are now coming straight to Africa, flocking here and trying to shape and influence how regulation, policy, and legislation is shaped in order for them to make money. We are seen as the last market, as just one example. The difficulty is that we do not currently have a framework that is recognized at a regional level or even at a national level at this stage, that organizes how it is that we want to make, or rather what the approach we want to take is in terms of how we develop this policy, develop this legislation, and develop these these regulations. So this offering here is simply to say to member states, and this is going to answer the question from the honourable member who opened, I think, around the fact that the relevance of this document for member states is simply to say, is that we need, as a people, for you to look at this document and see whether it may be applicable to your local context and perhaps even a sub-regional context towards this harmonization of our internet policy-making framework, as well as our internet governance processes and frameworks. So that is the status of the document, merely an offering from a broad body of civil society who have constituencies at the ground who are saying these are our needs. These are people who are engaging at a national level with their own member states around these principles. As I indicated in my opening, that in Nigeria, currently a bill is on the table and is being championed by members of parliament that is informed in a great way by these principles and what they aim to achieve. If I may, Chair, I beg your indulgence. I'd like to respond to the question or the comment that was raised by the honourable member from Gambia, I believe, which is that there is the question of rights, there is the question of privileges. Who accords those rights and who can restrict those privileges? And I think that we need to remember that because we work with rights-based frameworks, the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, the African, my apologies, my brain has stopped working, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, these things are clearly articulate that we are inherent right bearers, and it is the duty of our states and our regional, our sub-regional mechanisms, as well as our regional mechanisms, to ensure that those rights are not only enjoyed, but are protected and actively promoted for the benefit of the people of our states and of our continent. So I think that it's really important that we are mindful in our framing of rights and responsibilities and who is responsible for what. This framework, again, says it offers two state parties, two sub-regional and regional mechanisms, a framework to say when we integrate, not separate, not look at it differently, when we integrate the internet as an enabler of rights and freedoms and social and economic, social and cultural development in our respective countries and as a region as a whole, here are some things that we might want to consider in terms of ensuring that this happens from a country to regional level and from a regional level to a country level. So what can you do as members of the Pan-African Parliament when you return home? We ask you to simply engage, to read the principles, to think about them, to champion them if you believe in them within your own context, to interact with state actors, national human rights institutions who are at the front lines of upholding, protecting, promoting these rights, so that we can maybe find a way in which we can harmonize our internet governance and policy making frameworks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pamode, for that information and very enlightening discourse. I think he's asking of you, and you may grab it with both hands, that when you go back to your parliaments, you have questions to ask to your ministers. Do we have internet protections? Do we have a need for something like this? You can put motions to have it debated in your parliament. But more importantly, it gives us, as the members of the Pan-African Parliament, another opportunity in terms of a model law. As I was sitting here and the whole issue, because my main question was, what is the status of the document? And as I was sitting here, my brain was already in overdrive, because as we move from a consultative to a legislative body, we need to start developing